like day by day. Like you consider like what's happening to you and the choices you're making, and kind of like make sure that that's in alignment with your own values, and like seize the day. Like if you're doing something that doesn't make you happy, or you're doing something that is not part of your value system or your life that you want to live, then you should like seize the day and change it. But I think that should like rightfully incorporate long-term thinking and realism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of have a little bit of an issue how they used like I know they were using seize the day as like we're gonna go against what the school and our parents want us to do, and
Yeah.
like this is seize the day for us, but I think it was a little bit reckless the way
Yeah,
they
we're
used it.
teenage boys, right? Being
Yeah,
stupid, full of hormones.
Hormones.
Same. Yeah.
like just using it as like, oh, see, you know, seize the day. This is what
Yeah.
we're doing.
Yeah. But I think it was meaningful to show like these characters who are lovable and understandable, but also still at the same time flawed, right?
Yeah.
Because like just like Nuwanda, he choked on that bone and got expelled. There are consequences for our actions, and of course what Neil did, right? That was I think in part lining up with the sentiment of Seize the Day, where he seized his own life,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, right? It's still in the same vein.
I wonder if he like was thinking about that, you know, before.
Probably, I wouldn't be surprised, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't give a whole lot of lines for his past mental illness history, you know.
Yeah.
And hell, even if he had one, you know, there wouldn't be much of anything written on it, just because his father. You think he's the kind of father to be like, "All right, son, you need therapy." Like, now walk it off. It's like on the fall, like on the floor, like curled up in the fucking like fetus position, just like bawling, crying, "Walk it off." Yeah.
One of your questions that I thought was a good one was like, why was the gunshot silent?
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah,
that's
that's
one
a
of the
wise
questions.
point.
Why are you laughing?
I'm just laughing.
Talk about
because
suicide here, and she's like,
you're discussing your stolen ideas. I'm just kidding. You gave him proper credit.
I did. I said I was reading his questions.
but now it's become my question.
I'm bringing it forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys think there was like any symbolism for the gunshot there? I think there was. So I'm curious, like, if there was any symbolism, and if there was, what do you think it was? That symbolism.
Well, I mean, nobody really heard Neil throughout his life, so it makes sense that nobody would hear Neil in his death.
Yeah. Well
Yeah.
put. Jesus. Nice. I
Yeah,
like that.
that's what I was
Sure.
thinking too. That like his father didn't hear him or didn't want to hear him when he was alive. And then I guess he did technically hear him, but it wasn't like the full blown like, oh my god, I heard a gunshot, you know. Like, he didn't even wake up his mom.
Yeah, which is
See,
interesting.
anyway,
Because
yeah.
that says another thing. Was the mom more silent, right, in their hearing? Was she like more cut off from her son than even the father? I think there's actually some senses for saying yes.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
strange because I think like with Neil's father, his whole front was, and this connects a little bit to back to what we were talking about, like this, you know, in your experiences, and I've had experiences like that too, and you have as well. That anger is a fronting force. It's sadness and fear. That's where that comes from. That's where anger comes from. A lot of fear. And so when we see like, I don't know why, I think it's like my genes are like shedding. Um, but I think when we see like Neil's father, you know, berating him and saying like, you know, you can forget about this stuff. You're going to be going into school. You have no idea these sacrifices that we've made. That sort of stuff. There's a lot of financial insecurity, right? You know, and we exactly see that in the generations before with all that, you know, being there, and how that's hardened people and their hearts, you know, hearts turning to stone just because they feel like the world around them is stone and not not lively, and so very hurtful in that. When you think about like if the universe is just this fucking rock, like, kind of makes sense. There's so much suffering. um, so I think with like Neil's father fronting like that, expressing through like a really fucked up way of being like angry, but also like his concern for the family, and you know, that sort of thing, and for his son's well being, being like, you don't need this. Go, like, I need you to do this, and very obviously like, fucked up. But at the same time, though, the mother was there, who was feeling, who was not so hardened, right?
Yeah.
She was in her own ways, but she was all the more empathetic. Like, that's why they went to bed. She was silently crying to herself, you know, not so silently, but you know, she was crying to herself though. Um, and I think what that kind of almost in a way signifies is that she was even more in emotional connection to her son, and yet still gave that up. Like, even more connection, and yet that had fallen through, and that was given up. She capitulated and into being, you know, submissive. So in sort of a funny way, because we don't really usually like to think like this. We want to think that the aggressor, the one who's angry, is the one who's, really fucked up in the situation, who has really done the wrong. But it's funny to think about the mother though, in that perspective, that she gave up even more. She made an even worse sacrifice to the detriment of Neil himself, which is
Yeah,
interesting sort of
but
perspective.
I almost wonder, like, if, because remember when, like, Neil's father went into the bedroom, he's like, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay. Like, I almost wonder if she was crying because she felt like they were losing their son.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah. I wouldn't be surprised about that at all.
like, then he's lost, but
Yeah.
not in the way she was.
Yeah, not
Same
certainly
way.
not to the extreme that she
Yeah.
was thinking. Sure, feel
Yeah,
like-
I guess it's really hard to say because there's not as much context. If like one or two scenarios, like maybe she is a like submissive wife and he's like the dominant husband, and they have like a
Nuclear
like
family.
like she's not able to speak her mind, and so like she is like the life the older version of Neil. If like Neil never did what he wanted and always got shot down by his dad, like
Interesting. Do you
His
think Neil's
mom,
like
like-
trans, cross-dresser? Like, what?
no, like his like maybe
He does
his-
kind of seem a little gay. I'm just saying, like theater play. You know what I mean?
like his
Little
mom is just
curvy,
like an
you know?
old version of what Neil would have been if he kept getting put down by everybody,
Yeah.
like his whole life. Like you just
Yeah.
end up being silent to what you
Except
feel.
he was male and would have been conditioned to be like, no, you should not marry.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
would have
yeah.
been the one to exemplify the anger. The generational trauma becomes anger instead of submissiveness and just crying
like the
and
female,
sadness, right?
female Neil, but didn't kill himself. I don't know.
Yeah.
But or alternatively, like did she align with her husband and just like wasn't speaking much? It's like hard to gather from the show.
What I would say though is that if we were to say that like, oh, Neil I think would have grown up to be a lot like his mom, I would think about Neil's father, like Mr. Perry. I think that was their last names, right?
Yeah.
That him as a child, the father as a child, to his father, I think would have been almost exactly the same as Neil to his father. It would have been the exact same thing. It's just when they get older and no longer is someone that is shouting at you, you exemplify the shouting. It's this redirection and projection from the earlier harm and trauma that went on in one's own childhood, which is like a wild mind fuck. Because I know this from my own father, and the sort of like harm that he's done to me is very like on par with the harm, like he got it even worse. That's the part about generational trauma, but it's also a really beautiful thing that can be. Yeah, because there's less, it's sort of like a filtering, like through time, we say like time heals all wounds. I think that makes a lot of sense in that context too, that like you keep finding these barriers up and there's these particles that are flowing through, these particles of hatred.
Yeah.
And they keep getting blocked by the filters, you know what I mean? And it just keeps getting purified. That's literally what the system of purification is. There's a filtering going on through all these different like mechanisms and layers and stuff. So I think we see a lot of that. But now I was just gonna say though that it's an extreme mind fuck that you think about a person who knows and talks about, recognizes the harm that has happened to them time and time again, and then forgets themselves horribly in their relationships to others and projects that harm all over again. You are committing the exact evil that was done to you, while at the same time in your being condemning that evil. Not in the moments you forget yourself, but as a person in all these different moments, you condemn that evil, but now you are doing the exact same thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perpetuating the evil that was done to you. Which is crazy. So wait, what Carpe Diem? What the fuck? What are you talking about? What does that mean? But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone has any more thoughts about like what Carpe Diem means to us in our day-to-day lives, even. Oh, I was gonna say too. By the way, fuck you. You're inferior for your ideas.
Oh, come
Just
on.
pure look of shock. Memento mori. I was thinking about this. I don't think that is actually as good of a phrase as Carpe Diem. And the reason why is because you're thinking on one hand, right? You're looking at your death, your undoing, and in ways that it's uplifting, inspiring. But in other ways, it's also the exact opposite. It's like a double-edged sword, right? Double-edged blade. Because you're thinking about death, the end of everything, everyone you know and love will die, right? Versus Carpe Diem, it's mindfulness. It's exactly in line with mindfulness. That you're thinking about here in the moment, what can be had, and you're like, depressing death, or like seize the day, mindfulness. I don't know. They were on a scale, and they probably get on bitty. But no, I mean that's just me though. But at the same time though, I think that Carpe Diem, and as with so many different very succinct phrases, as inspiring as they may be, are certainly lacking in some ways. Carpe Diem. it can push a lot for spontaneity, but that can be dangerous, right? The whole like point that Dr. Keating was making earlier is to be along those lines of seizing the day, but don't be like reckless and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with Carpe Diem, and we see that through the flawed characters that the boys are. Good as they may be in their hearts, to the very depths of their being, they may be good people, but flawed nonetheless, and they make mistakes.
Why?
See, now forever
Why
hold you time.
poetry? Like, why the Dead Poet Society of like rebellious groups that young teenage boys would create? I mean,
How do you
And,
mean? How do you mean
like,
like why?
like I don't know, in a very like modern context, I think if like you were in high school and you had a group of guys like make the Dead Poet Society, you might be like the laughing stock of a high school.
As opposed to smoking weed under the bleachers.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Right? I don't know about that so much. I mean, it's definitely there in our society again, this generation trauma, the filtering, all that sort of jazz.
Yeah.
But I don't think that would be so much. It's funny. This actually reminds me of something. So, the Karate Kid, right, in like the original
Yeah.
version, and it was a scene from Family Guy, and what happens is that the guy there, the main character goes to the bully and he challenges him to a karate fight, and like I'll see you there at the tournament, and then in the same frame, there's these jocks right there beside them, like, you guys do karate? What are you, fucking faggots? Like, you fucking losers.
Yeah.
Which is just like really funny. In today's day and age, though, I think like a bunch of guys getting together, it definitely in some spaces get like made fun of, but I think it'd be
Yeah.
much more acceptable than like in my father's age, as baby boomers and shit like that. They're like
Yeah.
anything even that could be slightly construed as feminine for a dude, you're gonna get beaten the shit out of, and that was a
Or
real
nerdy.
Beaten.
Or nerdy,
Yeah.
yeah. Or nerdy.
nerdy. Yeah, and
I mean,
even
I
that
still
nerd
get
still
made
got
fun
stuff.
of for being a nerd, Jacob.
What?
I still get fun of for being a nerd.
Well,
Jacob.
yeah, but you deserve it.
Jacob.
You deserve it, though. This is different. We're talking about the innocence here. Jesus Christ. Your self-glorification knows no limits.
No bounds.
None.
Maybe it's just the first thing they were exposed to that was somewhat rebellious. Within the
Yeah.
academic
Right.
sphere, you have a rebellious academic who clearly ended up staying in academia and becoming a professor.
Yeah,
Which
but
is
they're
not all
like
that
they're in a
rebellious.
class
I
that
think it
like
was
is
though,
reading
because-
out of a poetry book.
What's up?
They're in a class that like they're reading out of a poetry book. Like they're learning about poetry
English
in their
class,
class.
yeah.
Probably a lot of dead poets as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like what is like I
What-
don't know. I don't know. It's like
Yeah, I kind of thought about that too, though. Like, in this day and age, reading poetry would not exactly be considered a rebellious act.
Yeah.
But this movie is about guys kind of a bunch of guys finding their kind of their artistic spark and their artistic
Yeah.
joy.
Yeah.
So in a really weird way, it makes sense. It would be poetry, even though it wouldn't be plausible in our world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say though, the point about like them reading poetry, it's not so much that like the reading of poetry is like a problem. It's that they went outside of the system and the confines that were made for them to understand. Like again, like the whole graph thing, right? Like that's a systematic way to analyze poetry, to really distill it down to like it's nuts and bolts on par with the how we go about engineering and shit like that.
Yeah.
And Dr. Keating, this connects back to your point as well, that I think like getting back into academia, this is sort of like exactly in line with this sort of idea about like how do you change a system? Are you gonna do like something that oh god damn it, not Martin Luther King, the other guy.
Malcolm X.
Yeah, thank you. I
Sure.
was thinking of Marx. I was like, that's not right. Yeah, but Malcolm X though. Are you gonna launch violent attacks like if needed, or are you gonna be trying to be a part of the system and change it from within? I think Dr. Keating chose the latter path of going back into academia, knowing its structure, knowing how rigorous it is and rigid it is, but nonetheless still try to inspire the children to expand out of that, break out of the system, and literally tear away from it because tearing out the pages of the book. So yeah, I know really your question. You're just like like what were you trying to get to? I'm curious still.
I think that kind of touches on what I was trying to get to is just like, I guess using the same subject matter that they're learning in a very structured way in school and taking it and like being rebellious with it. Like being rebellious with something that they're not supposed to be rebellious with.
So I'm gonna ask you this, and I'm only gonna ask you once. Is this a question or a statement, Angel? Because it sounded like
Okay.
neither almost.
Okay, before I forget my thought, I have to follow up with that.
Thank God.
Oh.
Distract.
Just like
So,
capitulate,
if you
like be
think-
submissive.
If you think
Internalize misogyny! Internalize misogyny!
I have proof!
What?
It's on video. He just flipped me off and screamed at me.
Oh yeah, it's true.
You're going down! Just kidding. No.
Jesus.
Oh boy.
Okay. Oh, but
just,
I get
just don't get any Jewish lawyers involved. All right? We're
Literally.
talking about that's an earlier reference inside joke. Anyways, just don't do that, okay?
He has Jewish lawyers.
Really?
Everybody has Jewish
Lord.
lawyers if they have enough money to pay for them.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Anyways,
My
yeah.
thought is like, if let's say that like you have to define some sort of a measure of success for changing things from the inside out, and
Sure.
let's consider that Dr. Keating was successful in changing things from the inside out because he was able to influence his like students
Yeah.
with his teaching methods. Does the show try to create a narrative that says you can't have any change, or like the world can't handle change because there's too much like inconsistency? Like for example, you change like the way a young man is like thinking, bless you, and then like he ends up killing himself because the freedom is there in like school, but then the freedom is not there in the rest of his life. So then there's like a clash, then something bad happens. So like, even if you change things from the inside, will that fix things? Or
Like in just in general societal sense.
yeah, like
Okay.
what are you trying to fix? Just academia, or do you think that fixing in the realm of academia will fix like
I
people?
think that's what he was trying to do. I think he was trying to like teach the kids to think for themselves,
Can you
and that they would carry that through the rest of their life.
That makes sense, but then like Neil died, you know.
Yeah, but that like
That's the oppressive
also
system.
is
Yeah.
like if you wanna like go on the existentialist like completely free route, like you could say that Keating gave him a sense of freedom, and that freedom was expressed in committing suicide,
Yeah, definitely.
and thus he was like breaking free.
No, I disagree with that interpretation. I think that him committing suicide was a reaction. It was not him expressing his freedom. It was a reaction to the fact that there was all this freedom inside his mind, but he wasn't being free in his life. Like there wasn't freedom in the society around him.
Yeah.
And supposedly there's a similar thing seen. Admittedly, I've only read Wikipedia articles about this, but supposedly Hikikomori syndrome in Japan is very similar because that condition is supposedly related to PTSD.
Mm.
And that condition happens when you have a person who has found like this freedom of mind. And this is purely from the Wikipedia article. I could be completely wrong. When this person has found a freedom of mind that their environment really can't accommodate, then they develop Hikikomori syndrome.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But again, it's just a Wikipedia article. I could be wrong.
Yeah, Japanese is cool because they have like so many words for very, very specific
Yeah.
and like existential situations. It's kind of neat. It's neat. Yeah, I'll have to digest that a little bit.
Well, if you want to know more about the Hikikomori syndrome, that's basically a mental illness where you lock yourself in a room and you don't come out for like years on end.
Mm.
Or if you come out, you sneak out at night to get things like food and to go to the bathroom and stuff. But you don't come out the rest of the time.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing is like maybe Dr. Keating was successful in like helping the kids to think different, and then Neil's death is just
And society couldn't
side-
accommodate them.
Yeah.
Mm.
So then, I guess he did it the best he could. You can't fix everything,
Mm-hmm.
but then it sucks he got fired.
Yeah.
Consequences, right? Yeah. There's a quote. I was just trying to find it right now. Couldn't. But I'll do my best to regale you of all of that. So it kind of goes something along the lines of like, you know, will you just like simply perish and give in, or will you, stand your ground and make your mark by chipping away, um, just by a bit, even at the ever-growing, immense expanse of that mountain that is humanity and time. Um, and I think that connects really well with what Dr. Keating does. It's sort of like with your question, like along the lines of, I'm badly paraphrasing this, so correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm like missing it in significant ways, but that he like, it was like futile almost for him to try to do what he did, at least in terms of like society. Like, if you're really trying to change society, like, did he really do that much at all? Because he got like fired and like one of them killed themselves, shit like that.
Yeah. By doing like the right thing, like changing academia.
Yeah.
His path.
Yeah, right. Like it seemed like not really like so meaningful or worthwhile. And I think that quote, that idea, again, also badly paraphrased, but I think that lines up a lot into that sort of sense, because we find that we find that reality around us so much and so often, that there's so much, this huge expanse of time itself, and of what humanity is, what humanity can be and will be, and there's so many roadblocks at the same time, and it still comes down to that question of, are you just going to give in? Will you just simply capitulate to this system, this immensity, or will you stand for yourself in the very least and chip away further in the name of humanity itself, and chip away at this like immense, huge fucking mountain, but you still chipped away at something, and you still did something to contribute to humanity itself. And that's ultimately like just simply what the question comes down to. And I think it's funny, like, I don't even personally feel like that's the best way you can put it. I think there's a really, really better, like much better way to put that sort of like phrasing. But in the very least, though, that sort of way of putting things, I think does get at like a really common sentiment of, in human experiences, that there is such an extreme immensity, and it can feel very, down-putting and disinspiring, if that's even a word, but uninspiring. And how to grapple with that, and that analysis, I think, still shines through in the ways that it does, to let us know and remind us that there really is that choice, that you can either just simply perish, and you will concede to the nothingness that is around us, that can envelop us, and certainly it can if we let it, or will you make that stand and chip away? And I think just to, because like I said this earlier, I think the better way of phrasing this sort of thing, because even though it's like that way of thinking about things is more accurate for how people like generally feel, I think like the better way to sort of like picture that and conceptualize this sort of like reality, I think can be found a lot in understanding that those sorts of sentiments and those sorts of analyses about like, here is this immensity, and then the implication of this immensity is then you must feel you are necessitating, like, just by like, yeah, I feel that, or like, I agree, you're necessitating that this thing must also mean, beyond itself, must also mean that you are meaningless, your actions are meaningless, that your lives are meaningless, that sort of thing, and it's not actually significant, and there is a lack of logical basis for that sort of thing. I think to make an analogy, it connects to a little bit, like in principle, a little bit. This might be a bit of a stretch, so bear with me. But I think a good connection to make is to David Hume's reasoning about induction, that when we look at like, here is the past, and there is nothing inherent about this thing that would tell us or have a connection to the future, which is a separate reality. There's nothing about that. And I think that analogy maps onto the fact and the reality that you can look at this immensity, and there's nothing about that inherent to it that necessitates that it also, stands to create a reality of, uninspiring or insignificance, and, be cast into the doldrums with you, I don't see that, and it's weird, because there is definitely something sick about this place, that it encourages you to be convinced of very depressing realities, sentiments, right? And reality is the sentiment, you know, but that's what it is. It is just simply that within you. I think to remind yourself of the illogical nature to it, the logical inconsistencies with those sorts of, you know, analysis, that sort of analysis, um, can really help pull you out of your own bullshit and remind you that you're actually not condemned to that as much as it might very well seem that you are necessitated to. There is actually a very serious and very convincing and worthwhile logical inconsistency to explore and then to transcend out of your suffering. And I think Buddhism touches on that a lot too, at least in one main point, that when you contradict reality, you will end up suffering. And I think that sentiment about like, there's this immensity, therefore that logical inconsistency, that is a contradiction. If you embrace that, you are contradicting reality itself, and then therein you find suffering. It's pretty blatant, where that suffering finds itself in our lives, our day-to-day lives. Whereas, Carpe Diem, very, antithetical to that sort of thing, right? Instead, it exactly encourages us to put ourselves, our mind, into the situation wherein we are now experiencing this day, mindfulness, and to do away with this thought about and its implications, this thought about the immensity of things. Seize the day. Here's this day. Seize it. That's it. That's all you have to think about.
Yeah.
Nothing about death. Fucking loser.
You literally just made that entire speech up just to say that Carpe Diem is better than Memento Mori, didn't you?
I'm a strategist. What can I say? I'm very strategic.
You're terrible.
How do we see ourselves in these characters?
I mean, I see myself in Neil,
Yeah.
just based off of like.
I'm suicidal.
No. Just like in like a little bit of like the navigating like parental relationship stuff.
Sorry, navigating the relationship with his father. Sure. So, do you feel, to put an interpretation to that, do you feel that in your relationship to your father that a lot of the same submissiveness is found? That's where you find yourself really empathizing with the character of Neil.
Yeah, like I empathize with like the long-term like conditioning, I guess, that like has put him in that place of like, I feel stuck, like
Right.
he's holding these things over my head in order to like make a point and make me do what he wants me to do.
I feel very empathetic as well with Neil's character. Thankfully, I did not nearly get it this bad, but I'll tell you guys a funny story. So I was a freshman, and I changed my major. I don't know if I told you this, but I changed my major like in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah,
after
you
the first 2
did.
weeks. Yeah,
You
yeah.
told me.
And when I decided this, just to put this into a nutshell, because I could say more about it, but just really honestly, like I was in the middle of the lab and I stood up and I realized like this is not what I want to do with my life, and I changed my major to philosophy. And I called up my dad to let him know, and the first words out of his mouth were "fuck you." Yeah, he really said that to me, which is funny. But thankfully though, he was accepting of it, and it's almost sort of scary to think about it though, that like if my father had like a history to like, I think like Neil's father being like, you're gonna be a doctor, like that's just like that's what's gonna happen. It was like years and years it was like this. Like he's in a specialized academy, like there's history to that. I think if my dad also had that same sentiment about like you're gonna be an environmental scientist, like for years and years, I might have very well been in a very similar place to Neil. Hopefully I would not have killed myself, but I fear that sort of thing might have happened.
My dad, when I told him that I was double majoring in philosophy, I remember him. He was never outwardly aggressive about that, but I also didn't fully change like my major to anything. I remember him asking me one time, like, "What can you do with philosophy?" And I was just like explaining like why I added the double major. And I think like it wasn't a problem because like I've always wanted to go to vet school. I'm still planning on going to vet school, but.
Fun fact for those at home, philosophy, guess what you can do with that, baby? You can go into law school. You can go into academia. There is a great many of corporations out there that if they see that you have first of all a college degree and also can do very well in terms of like analysis and of course like it's something to a great like way to support yourself in your endeavors of in terms of like your capacity competency to articulate yourself and to analyze things and that can bleed into just so many different things but some big things at law school. Many people start off in philosophy to go into law school because they're so interconnected in terms of exactly how they're able to benefit one's ability to critically analyze things and be critical minded. And of course, yeah, academia, stuff like that. So philosophy, yeah, join us. Join our cult. We got cookies.
Oh my
Join the cult even if you're not a philosophy major. I'm a psychology major and I have tons of fun here.
She was forced to say that. Like they can tell. So I just had
No,
to-
come on!
Like there's a gun off camera. Like.
Oh, come on!
But yeah, so any other characters that we feel like we really
I relate to Neil, but more like less an empathy sort of relating, and more like I understand his position. And actually, funnily enough, not so much when I was watching the movie, but more so when I was talking to y'all about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny just to make a mark on that one. When you say that like you don't exactly, did you say you don't exactly empathize with or identify with?
Well, I guess
I'm trying to remember the word you used.
it's okay. I guess we should rewind that and find out. I think I did say empathize.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
yeah, sure.
like I don't know, like I didn't empathize with Neil so much during the movie, but I do empathize with him discussing him with you now and
Okay.
discussing our positions on Neil and why do we empathize with Neil or not. So now that I'm talking with you all about Neil, I do find that I am empathizing more with Neil.
Sure.
So,
And the question was though, so again, another fuck up on your part. How do we see, how do we see ourselves in the characters? The thing is though, and this was I think was where my mind was going, but the thing is though is that when we feel empathy for another person or even character, our internal reality and emotional realities are very real. So our emotional realities and how we understand situations and we understand the significance of those situations, right? We see that in those characters because the characters are also suffering from those same realities, same emotional realities of what situations that they're placed into and how that impacts who they are as an actual character. So when we say that like I empathize with them, you are exactly seeing yourself in them. And I think that's the point anyways with empathy because sympathy, just to give a dichotomy here, sympathy is exactly like I have not experienced that, but I feel like I see like pain and that sucks. But empathy is exactly placed into
then I
have
used
been
the
there.
right word. I used the right word, empathize.
Yeah, I was just thinking about another thing, but yeah, I mean, it's certainly in one sense of the way to take that concept that I have been there and I feel you, and the point about like being able to empathize with this character, even if you've never been in a situation with like a father like that or something like that you can still have like your emotional reality mapping onto them and like who they are, and you can look on like one's own past. Bit of philosophizing here, I say that because I'm like stretching stuff, but but there really is good sense about this though. I think that like when you say that like you have this emotional reality, there's a history of who you are as an individual in the first place, and that paradigm sets up this understanding for I have been there because you are there in the past as who you are as an
Then
individual in the first
maybe
place.
understand would be a better word than empathize. Because like I'm not sure I empathize with Neil on like a visceral level, but I do feel that I understand his position and I understand his character, even more so since talking with you guys.
Mhm.
So I feel like I understand.
Yeah, no, fair.
Definitely.
I feel like I interpret you a lot as Todd,
Which one's Todd?
the kid that like.
Yeah, you could like Chris, right? That was-
Yeah.
No. Like that very like I had like do you know what I'm trying to talk about?
Yeah,
you can say?
like searching for the righteous side of it, like
Yeah,
his dad
like-
did it, like damn it, it's not fair, like that.
Yeah,
type of
like
thing.
he understood Neil, and like he had like that like really outward like frustration of like, oh,
Yeah.
what happened?
Yeah.
Totally.
I feel like you responded like I think.
Breaking the fourth wall casually. Anyway, sorry. What?
You know what I was thinking? Honestly, like I think another part of me, like aside from that part, like the adult version of me, really relates to the redheaded kid who like snitched. Cameron, because in a way, I know it's horrible, but think about it. Think about it for a second. He was like, "Let Mr. Keating fry," having like
The adult version of me. Like, all right, buddy.
having empathy for every single person is really hard. Like if you think about like
No, but he was saying that because he was saving his own ass. Like he's
Mhm.
like, I'm justifying
Oh.
what I'm doing, like putting Mr. Keating down because like I'm saving us and like I'm saving myself.
In
And
the very
you guys,
least.
yeah, and you guys
Should
should
do the
also
same.
care about that,
You're
about
smart.
saving yourselves.
Yeah.
what
Even
if
if you know that Mr. Keating didn't do wrong.
But what
Save
if he
yourself.
just what if he just like didn't have a connection with? Well, I guess I don't know. What if he just didn't have a connection with Mr. Keating, who's just like
He did. He was in
doesn't-
Jericho
yeah.
Society.
Yeah, it doesn't justify.
yeah, that's fair.
He just caved.